Today we are going to understand the classification of the work of a psychologist. Who is a psychologist? A psychologist is a professional who practices psychology and studies mental states, perceptual, cognitive, emotional, and social processes and behavior. Their work often involves the experimentation, observation, and interpretation of how individuals relate to each other and to their environment. Psychologists usually acquire a bachelor's degree in psychology, followed by a master's degree or a doctorate in psychology. Unlike psychiatric physicians and psychiatric nurse practitioners, psychologists usually cannot prescribe medication. But depending on the jurisdiction, some psychologists with additional training can be licensed for therapies. Psychologists receive extensive training in psychological testing, scoring, interpretation, and reporting, while psychiatrists are not usually trained in psychological testing. Psychologists are also trained in and often specialize in one or more psychotherapies to improve symptoms of many mental disorders, including one or more disorder like anxiety, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, personality disorder, or eating disorder. Treatment from psychologists can be individual or in groups. So, today we are going to understand the models of psychology through various approaches. So, we have the process and the person approach. The process approach. Under process approach, we have the biopsychosocial model, which was first conceptualized by George Engel in 1977, who suggested that to understand a person's medical condition, it's not simply the biological factors to consider, but also the psychological and social factors. So, what are the biological factors? Bio, that is physiological pathology. Psycho, that is thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, such as psychological distress, fear, avoidance, belief, current coping methods, and attributions. Social, that is social, economical, social, environmental, and cultural factors, such as work issues, family circumstances, benefits, economics. The biopsychosocial model or perspective in psychology helps us to understand and to join various pieces together in different parts of a person's story. This perspective says that a person's behavior and thoughts can only be explained by taking into account three factors. And what are these three factors? Biological, psychological, and social factors. Humans are made up of systems within their bodies, psychology, and social lives. Humans are biopsychosocial beings. The biopsychosocial model focuses on how biological, psychological, and social factors influences human behavior and mental processes. Biological factors within the biopsychosocial model are factors that exist within the human body that directly affect how a person behaves and how they think. Our bodies are made up of many systems that are interconnected. So, when we consider how biological factors affect how we behave and think, we must examine all these internal processes even though we are not aware of what is happening inside. Biological factors are what factors? What are all these factors? Physical, physiological, neurological, chemical, genetic. Examples of biological factors: physical health or illness, genetic predispositions, genetic mutation, physiological changes, abnormal level of specific neurotransmitters, hormonal imbalance, brain injuries, misfiring of neurons. What are the psychological factors of biopsychosocial model? Psychological factors within the biopsychosocial model are factors that involve the human mind and its functions. Psychological factors include mental and emotional factors. Now, the examples of psychological factors: cognitive processes, perception. When you give meaning to something, becomes your perception. All your mental activities come under cognitive processes. And when you interpret, your perception, your cognitive processes, learned expectations, emotional responses, mental disorders, memories, personality, past experiences of similar situations, and trauma are all examples of psychological factors. Social factors of the biopsychosocial model. What are the social factors? Social factors within this biopsychosocial model are factors that affect thoughts and behavior within a social and cultural context. Social factors refers to the factors and conditions within the environment where people are born, they live, play, work, and age. What are the examples of social factors? Peer, parent, group influences, your social cognition, culture, societal expectations, the presence of others in a situation, personal, family, and religious values, your role model, media, access to social services, access to quality healthcare, your education are all examples of social factors. Now we are going to understand what is a cognitive approach. The cognitive approach gave rise to the idea that internal mental behavior could be studied using experiments. Cognitive psychology assumes that there is an internal process that occurs between when a stimulus happens and when you respond to it. So, stimulus happening and when you respond. Cognitive psychology is the scientific study of the mind as an information processor. It concerns how we take in information from the outside world and how we make sense of that information inside us, how we process information. So, somewhere we are encoding, we are storing, and we are retrieving information. Psychology focuses on studying mental processes, including how people perceive, think, remember, learn, solve problems, and make decisions. Cognitive psychologists try to build up cognitive models of information processing that goes on inside people's mind, including perception, attention, language, memory, thinking, and consciousness. Cognitive psychology became of great importance in the mid 1950s. Various factors were important that time. Dissatisfaction with the behaviorist approach in its simple emphasis on external behavior rather than internal processes. The development of better experimental methods. Moving on to comparative psychology. Comparative psychology refers to the scientific study of behavior, mental processes of non human, especially as these relate to the phylogenetic history, adaptive significance, and development of behavior. The phase of comparative psychology may be employed in a narrow and a broad meaning. In its narrow meaning, it refers to the study of the similarity and differences in the psychology and behavior of different species. In the broader meaning, comparative psychology includes comparison between different biological and social cultural groups such as species, gender, developmental stages, ages, and ethnicities. Research in this area addresses many different issues, uses many different methods, and explores the behavior of many different species from insect to primates. Comparative psychology is sometimes assumed to emphasize cross species comparisons, including those between humans and animals. However, some researchers feel that direct comparison should not be the sole focus of comparative psychology, and that intense focus on a single organism to understand its behavior is just as desirable, if not more so. Donald Dewberry reviewed the work of several psychologists, and these definitions concluded that the object of comparative psychology is to establish principles of generality, focusing on both proximate and ultimate causation. Now, understanding psychology, field, description, career opportunities, biopsychology, and neuroscience. This field examines the physiological basis of behavior in animals and humans by studying the functioning of different brain areas and the effect of hormones and neurotransmitters on behavior. Most biopsychologists work in research settings, for instance, at universities for federal government and in research labs. Clinical and counseling psychology. These are the largest field of psychology. The focus is on assessment, diagnosis, causes, and treatment of mental disorders. Clinical and counseling psychologists provide therapy to patients with the goal of improving their life experiences. They work in hospitals, schools, social agencies, and private practices. Because the demand for this career is high, entry to academic programs is highly competitive. Cognitive psychology. This field uses sophisticated research methods, experimentation, including reaction time and brain imaging, to study memory, language, thinking of humans. Cognitive psychologists work primarily in research settings, although some of them consult for businesses. Developmental psychology. These psychologists conduct research on the cognitive, emotional, and social changes that occur across the lifespan. Many work in research settings, although others work in schools and community agencies to help improve and evaluate the effectiveness of intervention programs such as Head Start. Forensic psychology. Forensic psychology. In this, psychologists apply psychological principles to understand the behavior of judges, lawyers, courtroom juries, and others in criminal justice system. Forensic psychologists work in the criminal justice system. They may testify in court and may provide information about the reliability of eyewitness testimony and jury selection. Health psychology. Health psychologists are concerned with understanding how biology, behavior, and social situation influence health and illness. Health psychologists work with medical professionals in clinical settings to promote better health, conduct research, and teach at universities. Industrial, organizational, and environmental psychology. Industrial organizational psychology applies psychology to the workplace with the goal of improving the performance and well being of employees. There are a wide variety of career opportunities in these fields, generally working in businesses. These psychologists help select employees, evaluate employee performance, and examine the effect of different working conditions on behavior. They may also work to design equipment and environments that improve employee performance and reduce accidents. Personality psychology. These psychologists study people and the differences among them. The goal is to develop theories that explain the psychological processes of individuals and to focus on individual differences. Most work in academic settings, but the skill of personality psychologists are also in demand in business, for example, in advertising and marketing. PhD programs in personality psychology are often connected with the programs in social psychology, school, and educational psychology. This field studies how people learn in school, how to make teaching learning more effective, the effectiveness of school programs, and the psychology of teaching. School psychologists work in elementary and secondary schools or school district offices with students, teachers, parents, and administrators. They may assess children's psychological and learning problems and develop programs to minimize the impact of these problems. Social and cross-cultural psychology. This field examines people's interaction with other people. The topic of study include conformity, group behavior, leadership, attitude, social cognition, personal perception. Many social psychologists work in marketing, advertising, organizational system design, and other applied psychology fields. Sports psychology. This field studies the psychological aspects of sports behavior. The goal is to understand the psychological factors that influence performance in sports, including the role of exercise and team interaction. Sports psychologists work in gyms, schools, professional sports teams, and other areas where sports are practiced.